So if you've been living under a rock for a few weeks, you might not know that Google has confirmed that they're going to stick to a tried and tested Pixel design, at least for the foreseeable future. Personally, I think this is not only a good thing, it's a great thing for a lot of reasons, but yeah, let's get into it in this video. Do me a solid before we get into this deeply though, and hit that subscribe button for more Pixel news, previews, reviews, and overviews, and every little helps me out here, probably more than you know, so slap that subscribe button, cheers. So when we look at the wider smartphone ecosystem, space, whatever you want to call it, over the past few years, I think save foldables, most smartphones, they've more or less converged, at least in the core design, the stature, and those functions that we all seem to know and love. Because the front of a phone is almost all display now, the only real way to truly differentiate your device from another phone out there is how the camera stack looks at the back of the phone itself. Samsung and Apple, they haven't fully got the memo because they've been trying to chase thinner profiles with the Galaxy S25 Edge and the iPhone Air over the last year or so, but with a smaller portfolio and less room for experimental form factors, Google has just doubled down with the camera bar at the back of their phones that they introduced with the Pixel 6 series in 2021 to help make the Pixel lineup stand out. And without that, you could sort of be forgiven for thinking that the most recent Pixel 9 and the Pixel 10 were just, well, let's be completely honest, rebadged iPhones. From a pure aesthetic perspective, I do think there isn't a great deal of wiggle room to change things up without giving up the identity that Google has cultivated or affect the overall usability of hardware that Google seems to be finally getting a grip of. You get smaller display bezels, yeah, we'd love that. A bigger camera bump, yeah, that's probably going to be a go-to. Maybe we get a thinner profile. I think realistically, when we start to look at the wider space, we hit peak smartphone more than a few years ago, and only the Chinese OEMs are really trying to do anything majorly different with their own massive camera sensors and therefore hulking camera bulges at the back of their phones to take advantage of that new hardware. Google won't do that with the Pixel design, as I do think the company is focused on refining a product that, let's be honest, has only really started to become competitive in most areas for the first time with the Pixel 8 series and so on. Although I do think there are similarities in size and stature thanks to the camera bar, the Pixel does have a strong identity that not only pays homage to the most iconic Nexus phones, Nexus 6P, what more could you ask for? We've had that central camera position before on phones from other Android OEMs, but I think few have really done it quite so intently and so overtly. This camera bar is entirely unique and it's a strong visual anchor for the Pixel brand, which is why I do think Google is hesitant to give it up now that they've confirmed they're sticking with designs for a few years. Given how important the camera has been for Pixel phones, I think this is Google's way of telling us this phone is all about the camera. One of the few downsides is that while we do have camera bars on the back of slab phones, the lack of a camera strip on the Pixel 9 Pro Fold and the 10 Pro Fold, while they share a lot of the lineage, they do so probably due to engineering constraints. These phones still keep that floating panel for their own camera layouts, and while it's not as prominent, I do think it still retains some of that true camera bar aesthetic without getting too far away from the original premise. And of course, foldable phones are a slightly different market anyway. A lot of this is to say it feels like we're very much at the limit of smartphone design. Some brands are going thinner and lighter, like Samsung and Apple, while others are trying to go bolder and bigger. Google is kind of slap bang in the middle of that, and it seems to be the safest play today, and I really think this is important. Why does this matter though? Well, Google has flat out confirmed, as I say, that we are not going to get major design changes each and every year from now on. We're all well aware that the Pixel 10 was the first to rehash the previous design so overtly, which will continue at least through to the Pixel 11, maybe the Pixel 12, according to comments from Google's Chief Design Officer for hardware products, Ivy Ross. Designs are basically finalized from now until 2027. For better or worse, we're going to see this same design for a while to come. So when you see leaks in the coming months, yeah, probably going to not be that much of a shock. Naturally, Google were going to get criticism. I think one of the base level criticisms that have been rightly leveled at the Pixel lineup since the first generation is how closely some designs have skirted that fine line of copycat or homage to the iPhone series. Google isn't the only brand that does this. The problem is that many Android OEMs look at what comes out of Cupertino and just use that as the basis for their own phone designs. Despite having good ideas of their own, I do think they should double down on. This has led to some convergence of hardware, and when Apple does make a change, we then tend to see more brands adopt the best of these and even some of the worst. Xiaomi and Oppo spring to mind there, but Google saw that and kind of went all in with the Pixel 9 and Pixel 10, saved that one key component in terms of taking what Apple is doing and running with it. Either by a stroke of luck or a strange coincidence, we're actually now starting to see more brands look to Google for inspiration. Take, for example, the recent iPhone 17 Pro, which, hey, I'm going to say it outright, I think it has more than a faint whiff of the camera bar at the back of it. Apple can call the camera bump whatever they want, but it's still a camera bar a little bit like what Google is doing, maybe up to the max as it were. Sony has also ripped up the camera bar with their brand new Xperia 10 series handset. This signifies to me that the camera bar is a very strong choice that captures buyers' attention. And Google, yeah, they borrowed some of their own designs from their Pixel, from other phones, but now others are starting to borrow directly from Google, which is always a good sign. And given Google's small global market share, technically they're only available in 33 markets, this is a really good sign. When big players start to look at what you're doing and start to, hey, copy your designs, you know you're doing something right. You don't need to throw away all of your good ideas when taking design cues from others, and I think that's where Google really showed their strength with the Pixel 9 series and now the Pixel 10 series to follow. One added bonus here is that incremental design changes in each cycle are probably where, hey, we're going to see this with the wider smartphone space, but changes for the sake of change, few out there like them. It's not really worth it if it means introducing other problems to the devices or potentially introducing hardware faults. And while it's great to see new designs year over year, does it really make all that much of a difference? I'd wager no to how you'd use a phone, but there's another reason why keeping a similar or the same design is potentially a good thing for the planet specifically. Basically, as a species, we continue to use resources as if they're not finite, and yeah, they very much are. So by sticking with a specific design, we lose out, yeah, on the new, but our phones become more repairable and therefore more sustainable. Sure, by no stretch is any modern top-tier phone anything like the Fairphone lineup, for instance, in terms of their sustainability. That said, Google's at least trying to improve the situation and give owners options to repair and restore their devices. If the phones don't change too drastically year to year, that's only going to get better. It's also worth noting the Pixel 10 lineup uses at least 32% recycled materials inside. That isn't a minor change, it's a pretty significant commitment, and by using 100% recycled aluminium for the chassis, which the Pixel 10 does, and increasing those recycled components over 32% of the phone's actual weight, Google is taking some serious steps toward reducing their own e-waste. Granted, there won't be as much as other brands because they don't sell as many. I think on top of that, improved dust and water resistance should mean better longevity in more situations, meaning, yeah, if you get your phone into some scrapes that you would have done a few years ago, you're not potentially having to replace the entire thing all at once. So repairability has increased once again this year, and partnerships with brands like iFixit and full guides from those companies on how to troubleshoot hardware issues and faults are just part of the reason why reusing a design is a good thing. Phones are essential in today's society, and with Google also promising 7-year update plans, longevity is a key concern. If you can find parts and repair your phone for years to come, it's a tangible, consumer-focused benefit of using the same design. On top of that, retooling manufacturing by adjusting designs and throwing out a solid setup is not something that makes a whole lot of sense when the Google Pixel lineup is still finding its feet after years of trying to crack the market. Even Rick Osterloh admits that the Pixel will never be a giant player in the market, but small gains each year are only a good thing, and it's only going to get better as Google can convince people that these are reliable, great value devices to buy. So the design is settled on, but frustratingly, Tensor remains that key weak point of all recent Pixel phones. Google can bleat about AI prowess and local processing, but the fact is we do need more powerful chips, at least those that compare to Qualcomm's latest and greatest, maybe even last year's Qualcomm's best chips, because I do think that is more than enough for most people. AI just isn't going to help out when you want to do things like play high-end games, or if you want to quickly edit a video shot on your phone. There is only so much that cloud computing can do to help on-device performance when tasks are so far behind the competition. At some point, chip power does matter, and it feels like the Tensor G5 is the last chip that we can potentially give a pass, as we need raw performance gains if phones are to be supported for 7 years into the future. The latest chips are going to get left behind pretty darn quickly, and your phone will therefore age quickly, but it'll also be a nightmare for that all-important resale value most owners do genuinely care about. It's also worth noting there's no escaping AI at the moment. It probably isn't going to get better anytime soon either if you're an AI hater. There is only so much though that AI and Gemini can help the Pixel phone's performance and the experience. You have to be very confident that people will want or desire certain features that you're trying to sell your phones on. Take for example Magic Q. It is, or it could be, a great addition. I say could because so far it's only a function that you tend to see if you have certain first-party Google applications on your phone, and it doesn't always appear when you think you'll want it or you think you'll need it. But I do understand that, like Gemini as the platform, it will start to rapidly develop and improve the longer that it exists and the longer that people are using it on their devices. The suite of calling functions as well are great if you take or place calls on your phone, especially if you're the kind of person who does that nowadays. Maybe people aren't doing that as much as they used to in the past, but they are value adds that don't necessarily matter all that much about what the device looks like or the power under the hood. As far as AI goes, nothing is a truly killer application or service quite yet though. Google's approach has been to make those AI functions feel helpful, but not necessarily a core component. They're merely side notes to all combine with Pixel phones to be considered useful on those devices. That's all despite ploughing millions into jazzy ads showcasing some of the ways you can use Gemini on a Google Pixel. Realistically, that platform is going to be more important to the actual Pixel hardware than Google. This probably explains why there aren't too many truly exclusive Pixel features to keep you tied into one phone specifically, especially as the sales figures are not that high. You're still going to use Google services on other Android, which I think is both a weakness and a strength of the company wholesale. Ultimately though, it seems like Google's playing the long game with the Pixel lineup. Yeah, the design isn't just about the phone that you buy today. It's about more than that. It's about repairability that for something that you might keep for 7 years, and the future of a brand that's at least started to find its footing with their last few releases. I think it's a bold bet. It's a bold bet on a familiar phone that you're going to see year after year, and a sign, at least from Google, that hardware is simply a vessel for that experience housed within the metal chassis. Whether it pays off, I mean, that's another question entirely. I want to ask you though, what do you think? Do you think Google is making the right decision by potentially shifting focus from design and maybe not doing that every so often, refreshing every year or so, maybe waiting a bit longer and trying to improve in areas that matter more to us on a day-to-day basis? Yeah, let me know what you think down in the comment sections below. I have to say, I don't have a problem with Google sticking with the design for a few years if it means we get improvements in the right areas, and right is where we need it to be. It needs to be the chipset and some other areas that are really, really important to Pixel fans, Android fans, and anybody else in between. But yeah, let me know what you think down in the comment sections below. Thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you later.